Honorius, born Flavius Honorius, was born on the 9th of September 384 AD. He would be co-Augustus with his father Theodosius from 393 to 395, and would rule on his own as Augustus from 395 to 423 AD, with his co-emperor in 321 AD being Constantius III. During his reign, he will have to face many revolts in Germanic tribes. In the early part of his reign, he depended heavily on Stilicho, a competent general who was quite ambitious, and he would have to put down many revolts and would overall be a good general, stabilizing Italy and other parts of the empire. The first major problem was revolt in North Africa, which was put down under Stilicho, and the leader Gildo would be executed. This was between 397 and 398. And the next problem would be an invasion of Visigoths into Italy. Stilicho would fight indecisive battles with them, and they would eventually just retreat back to Illyria. But at the same time, about 3 years later, a man named Radagaises, who was a commander of Germanic tribes, invaded Italy. Him and Stilicho would fight many indecisive battles, and he devastated Italy. But eventually Stilicho defeated him, and he died, and he was gone. But this would just devastate the Italian countryside. But then they would face instability from Britannia. The Britons were in revolt since about 406, first under a leader named Marcus from 406 to 407, then Gratian in 407, and eventually Constantine III, a rival emperor who then invaded Gaul. And at this point, many German tribes were crossing from Gaul into Spain, and many tribes from Germania were also crossing into Spain. So Germans were invading the empire, and he defeated some, but this would be a major problem for Honorius as a rival emperor was in Gaul and Britain. Around this time, Honorius also executed Stilicho, his only competent military commander. This was quite a boneheaded move from Honorius, and would prove devastating to the empire. And Stilicho accepted his fate valiantly and prevented another civil war. But Honorius also executed his son and many of his Germanic troops, which enraged Alaric, who was the leader of the Visigoths had previously invaded, and was now even more angry at the mass amount of slaughter that his people were facing. And this was just because of their prejudice. And eventually Alaric was negotiating, but Alaric put a rival emperor named Priscus Attalus. Priscus was very unpopular as he tried to invade Africa because that was under Honorius' control at this time. And Africa was vital for grain that was going into Rome. So the people started not to like him, so he sent an expeditionary force, which was annihilated by the governor. And this, with his unpopularity, and Honorius was eventually deposed by Alaric. And Alaric was negotiating with the Honorius, but eventually Honorius at the last minute broke off negotiations. Alaric was even more enraged than before, and he sacked the eternal city of Rome. This was quite devastating and a massive prestige loss, as Rome had not been sacked in 800 years, since the time of Brennus and the Gauls. And this really shows you how far Rome had fallen at this point, as it was not able to contend with Germanic invaders. And there's a famous portrait here, and it was really a very famous event, and really made a bad point of Honorius' reign. And after Constantine III left Britannia, there was no more Roman legions in Britannia. So Honorius told the Britons that they were on their own. And this would be very bad for Britannia, as they would now have to contend with Anglo-Saxon invaders. And it would really not be terrible for the empire, because Britannia was not a prosperous province, and it was home to many legions that could have been used for the current invaders of the empire. And this would not be good for Britain, but Honorius viewed it as necessary. And there was unrest in Gaul at this time. In 406, massive amounts of Germanic tribes crossed, and this would not be good, as this would truly lead to the loss of Gaul later on and the true destabilization of it, And as Constantine III crossed in to Gaul, he posed as a rival to Honorius. Although at this time, Constantine was experiencing internal issues with his general Constantius, who proclaimed Maximus emperor. At this time, there was a revolt in Gaul under Jovinus in northern Gaul, who met with Ataulf, the leader of the Goths, and he was seeking alliance with them. But when he proclaimed his brother Augustus Sebastianus, Ataulf, leader of the Goths, successor to Alaric, went and allied with Honorius, who went to northern Gaul and defeated and killed Jovinus and presumably Sebastianus. And that ended the problems in northern Gaul. Although this mass unrest in Gaul with Franks in the northeast and the Gallic nobility really drifting away from Rome would be not good. Although much of the population was Romanized at this point, since it had been under Roman control for 400 years at this point, this was slowly being Germanized due to all the tribes. At this time, a revolt in Africa under a general named Heraclianus was put down. Although Africa was becoming less stable, an empire in general, as just province governors just think they could revolt. Constantius, who was a capable general and had put down a revolt under Constantius III while he was in revolt with Constantius. Constantius would come in and would defeat and kill Constantine III, Constantius, and Maximus. And this would be good for the empire, as now there were no more claimants that could just revolt and that were in revolt. And he would be so good that he would marry the emperor's sister, Galla Placidia, and would be co-emperor with Honorius in 321, but only 321, as he would later die that year. Constantius III was capable, although he did not manage to exercise power for very long, although he was a good commander. The disintegration of the empire was occurring at this time. Visigoths were in Aquitaine, which would become southwestern France, and many Germanic tribes were in Spain. And this is not including the massive northeastern portion of Gaul that was under Frankish influence. The loss of Britannia and the Gallic nobility slowly drifting away from the empire, as no longer imperial governors were at certain provinces. And there were these Germanic tribes that were working independently with Roman territory, that were not Romanizing or learning Latin. And even the native population of Romans were integrating with some Germanic values, so it's meshing. Was Honorius a good emperor? He'd be F tier. I'd put him at the worst Roman emperor. At the time where the empire needed him most, he was an incompetent child, and he actively made the empire worse with the execution of Stilicho and breaking negotiations with Alaric, which would lead to the sack of Rome. During his reign, he also lost Britannia and was weak and ruled by ministers that turned out to be pretty ineffective. We also see the slow disintegration of the empire with the loosening of Roman control over these provinces and the slowly Germanization of those. Honorius would die of edema on the 15th of August, 423 AD. So that's the end of the video. Subscribe, like. I hope you enjoyed the video. Goodbye.